Hello everybody, this is Mr. Ashe and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Blender Basics today. So Blender is this awesome 3D modeling package that you can get online for free, and you might have seen some work of people doing online 3D graphics. If you're wanting to get into 3D graphics and you just need to get started, here is how you get started. So you go to blender.org to download Blender. And if you have a fairly new computer, you should have no problem running the latest version, which is 2.82a. Now, that version has the latest sculpting tools, particle physics, liquid simulations, all kinds of stuff. It's super robust, great software that'll do just about everything you want to do in CG graphics. If you have a computer that's a little older, maybe 5 to 10 years old, I would recommend you find an older version of Blender. Probably Blender 2.78 is a reliable choice. To get to Blender 2.78, you can go to Blender previous versions. Just Google that, and then you'll get previous versions link. You can select here, and now you have access to all of the versions of Blender. So if you want to see Blender 1.0, you could actually download Blender 1.0 and use the oldest version of Blender that exists. Blender 2.78 is right here, and yeah, that's the version I would recommend if you have a pretty old computer and you try to run the latest Blender and it just doesn't work. I would say go with 2.78 or 2.79. There's a substantial amount of difference between 2.79 and 2.8 or 2.82, but it still will give you a method to learn CG graphics. And to find tutorials for those older versions of Blender, you can actually go on YouTube. There's lots of content for Blender 2.78 that still exists out there. So just if you have an old computer, you can still get started in 3D graphics if you like. Okay, but that's how you get Blender. I'm just going to blender.org. It should look like this. Okay. But then once you have the install file, it's just a simple, click on the executable and run it. Now, to make a single video to teach Blender is not really all that easy. Blender is a massive piece of software that will do just about anything you'd want to do. You can make professional level 3D graphics for many different contexts. You can add graphics to movies, for example. You can add virtual 3D objects and make them blend in seamlessly in an environment that you record on camera. It's called compositing. Just like the stuff they do in Avatar, for example. You can do that in Blender. But just getting started, I think the best thing would be to just talk about how to edit the mesh of an object in a very basic level, just moving verts around, moving the vertices, and then maybe show you how to render a picture of whatever you created. So I'm just going to go into some very simple keyboard shortcuts and just kind of show you how to get started here. First thing, to edit, you actually need to get into edit mode. Am I recording? Yeah, I'm recording. Okay, there we go. Make sure you're in edit mode. So to get in edit mode, you can use a switcher, which is over here, and switch into edit mode. And that puts this object in edit mode. Or you can switch back to object mode. Now another way to do that is press tab on your keyboard. That's just the normal tab key that's right here. You just press tab. And then with your object selected, press tab and you will go into edit mode that way. How do we move around in Blender? Okay, so you need a mouse to navigate in Blender. If you don't have a mouse, you can use a trackpad, or if you're on a Mac, you can do it with, if you have a Mac with a single button, you can do it, but it's just, you really want a mouse with a scroll wheel. That's really the optimal situation here. Okay, so to orbit, you actually hold down the middle mouse wheel, and then you move your mouse on your mouse pad or your surface, and then you get this orbiting action. Now if you want to pan across the screen, you hold shift and then do the mouse wheel, and now you're panning. And then if you would like to truck in and out or zoom in, but I think trucking is the term that's used usually, use the scroll wheel in and out. Another neat way for navigating your scene if you're in object mode is using the period on your numpad. So if you select an object and you press the period on your numpad, you will zoom in on that object. If you can't see your object in your window and you need to find it, you can select it in this hierarchy and then press period on your numpad and zoom in on that object. Okay. There's a lot of different ways to interact with your scene in Blender. Another way to move your perspective of your camera is actually holding Shift, and there's this tilde key. Okay, the tilde key is like right below Escape. Okay, if you hold Shift and tilde, you get fly mode, which gives you you can just pretend you're on a first-person shooter, and you do WASD and spacebar, and you can shift, I think, to crouch even, or run. Oh, shift is running. There you go. And I think you scroll to slow down or speed up how fast you move. But this is like no other 3D software, I think, really does the fly mode. It's really cool. So those are some ways to navigate your scene. Now, now that I've explained how to get into edit mode and how to navigate your scene, let's actually edit this cube a little bit. So I'm just going to turn this cube into a house-looking thing. So to do that, I'm going to press Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to switch to face selection. So in this switcher here, you can go from vertex select to edge select to face select. You just select the one you want and you go into that mode. You actually can select multiple modes by holding Shift and clicking on these, but it's easier for me to just stay in one at a time. So I'm going to be in face select mode. I'm going to select the top of my cube. I'm going to press E on my keyboard. What E does is it extrudes. Now when you extrude a face, you actually get a lot of geometry created. We're creating edges all along, or faces all around, as we drag that face up in the air. You know, I like to think of this as like almost like a bubble wand, and I just take that face is like my bubble wand, and as I pull it up, that creates that shape. So I'm turning a face into a solid by extruding it. So you go from 2D to 3D, right? So I'm going to pull that up just a little bit, and now I have the extension, which will become my roof. Now I need to turn this I need triangular faces now at this point, right? Because I got rectangle here, I got a rectangle here. I want to bring these corners together. So I'm going to use an operation in Blender. It's called scaling. Okay, I'm going to scale these two edges right on top of each other. I'm going to do that by scaling it on the y-axis. So the y-axis is this green line right here, and you can see that over here as well. I'm going to scale this edge and this edge. I'm going to scale those on top of each other, so I'll end up with a triangular roof. So to do that, I'm going to go in edge select mode. I'm going to select this edge, hold Shift, and then select this edge. Press S for scale on my keyboard, and then press Y to constrain to y-axis, and then press 0, which allows me to say I want them on top of each other. Okay. Now I've created the shape that I wanted, but I've also created a problem. Okay. The problem is if I go into vertex select mode, and if I get a paintbrush select by pressing C, I can select this corner here, and if I look down here, or if I just grab one, what happens when I move it? You see when I move it, it's not one point, there's actually 2 points there. And that's because when I brought those two edges together, I didn't remove that extra one. So I need to remove doubles, okay? Or I need to merge these points together. So I'm going to actually merge the points together. I think it's a little easier. So I'm going to press C to pull up this paintbrush. I'm going to select those. And the problem I'm having right now, though, is I'm looking and it's only showing one vert. So I'm going to go into a transparent selection by toggling X-ray. And now, when I do that circle select, there we go. Now I'm collecting the two verts. I'm going to press M to merge, and then when Alt M is merge, and then I'm going to say at center. And what that does is now, when I select that, that's only one vert. Okay. Now I'm going to need to do that same thing over here. Two verts. Now Alt M, at center, and now it's one vert. So I've removed that double. Now another way to do that is two again. I don't know. Another way to do that is remove doubles. Now to remove doubles, you actually select everything in your mesh, and you go under Mesh, Cleanup, and you say Merge by Distance. And when you merge by distance, what it does is it says if they're close enough, they're on top of each other, and they'll remove them. But I already removed the vertices, so it's saying there's 0 verts to remove. So I don't need to worry about that. Okay, so I'm done making my house. All right, so I've talked about scaling and extruding, but what about other functions like just rotating or moving or whatever, right? So I'm going to show you those right now. Okay, so staying with the transparent selection, I'm going to press B on my keyboard to just select my whole thing. And that's a box select. Tap double A twice to deselect, and I'm just press B, and then I get a box select. Okay. And I can rotate. So if I press R, it just rotates. Now it's rotating at a weird angle, and what this angle represents is the axis from my camera straight forward into my scene. And I'm rotating it that way. And that's not really a very clear angle. You know, I'm just kind of rotating at a weird angle. What I want to do is rotate it around the Z-axis. So I'm just spinning the house, essentially. I'm going to go R, Z, and now I'm spinning on the Z-axis. If I want to rotate on Y-axis, same thing, R, Y. Now I'm rotating that way. So it's a little weird to understand what these operations mean until you practice. So all you out there, definitely need to practice R, rotating. What does it mean? You know, RX is this way, RY is this way. RY is this way, right? RX is this way. RZ is this way. I just want to put a little angle there. Okay, so that's how you rotate. You press R, and it also will work on just components of your mesh. Like if I select this and I press R, I just start messing with it, right? Right-click in the middle of your operation to cancel it, because I don't really want to wreck it that way. So you just press R on your keyboard for rotating. If you were trying to rotate by selecting a button, I'm pretty sure you can use these buttons here, but really, that's awkward. You know, don't do that. Use your keyboard. That's what people do with Blender. They use the keyboard. Okay, so that's rotating. I've scaled. I used S for scale when I brought those together, but just to show you what scaling is in general sense, if I select everything and keep that on there. See, where'd that widget come from? I didn't want that widget. Ah! Oh no, it's not going away now. I think there's a... Where's that button? I got the new button on. It's showing me that... I don't remember. Hopefully it'll disappear the next time I open Blender. But if you just press S on your keyboard, you're scaling. And scaling just like multiplies it to make it bigger. So if I want to make it twice as big, I could type in the keyboard S2, and that's twice as big. Or S4, 4 times as big. S100, and it's just huge. Okay, so that's scaling. It just makes it bigger or smaller. Rotating around axis. The last basic transformation move is translate in geometry. So you select everything. So I'm just going to select everything by pressing A. That selects everything. I'm going to press G on my keyboard, which is translate. And that just moves it like this. And over here you can, again, select this widget and do it with the mouse, but just press G on your keyboard, right? If I'm doing a video, I'm not gonna be clicking over there to do everything, because it's just wacky. Okay. So those are the basic transformation tools in Blender. You got translate, which is I could select everything to have things to move. And to translate, I press G. Okay, to rotate, I press R. Right click to cancel. I press S to scale. Okay. Again, right click to cancel. Okay, so That's the three basic transformation tools in Blender. I made this little house looking thing. Okay, now what I'm going to do is add a few objects to my scene and then change some colors and then make like a rendering of a house. Okay, so I'm going to do something new in object mode. So I'm going to go to object mode. I'm going to do Shift A, and that means add, and I'm going to add a plane. Now the plane is just a one-sided, think of it as a sheet of paper, but it actually doesn't have a back. It's like a sheet of paper that's one-sided. One-sided plane. It's awkward because really a piece of paper has two sides and it has an edge and all that, but like you can't see it because it's so small. A plane is literally just a square that has one side to it. The other side there's no side to it. I know, it's weird. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to GZ to bring it down, and then I'm going to S to scale it up. Then I'm going to mouse wheel. Maybe I'll press 1 on my numpad to go to front view, and notice everything lost perspective. That's called orthogonal view, and it automatically will pop up when you press 1 on the keyboard. What you really are achieving is front orthographic view, which cuts out the perspective. And this is handy for when you need to line things up. So like right now, the bottom of the house is right there. I need to bring this plane up. So I'm going to press GZ, and I'm just going to bring it up. So it just about intersects. It's okay if it does go through. That just means I don't have a shadow. So that's good for me. Now the next thing I want to do is move the camera. So I want to position the camera so that I get the house in view. If I press 0 on my numpad, I get the camera view. And the camera view tells me what's going to render when I finish my model. And looking at it right now, you'll see I'm just getting like part of the side of the house and a little bit of the roof. It's not really very good. I need to reposition this. So to reposition it, I press 0 to bring up the camera view. And then I do Shift tilde. So tilde is this little button right here. It's below escape, and it looks like a little squiggly line. And you don't have to hold, I guess it's like you're just hitting tilde because you have to do Shift to get to tilde. So Shift, and then you press that button to get to tilde. And now you can position it. Since we're in camera mode, and we just did that, now we're moving using WASD, like same as all your first-person shooter games. You're positioning the camera according to that conventions. Okay, so WASD and use your mouse to change the angle. So there we go, there's my house. And the next thing I kind of need to work on is the light source. So I have one light source in here right now, and it's if I switch into a render preview here, you'll see it's pretty dim. Okay, it's not really positioned in a very good place. So I want to light this up a little better. So I'm going to move this light up, and then I'm going to change some properties on it. So I'm going to press GZ to bring it up a little higher. And then I'm going to go into my lights properties in this menu down here. And I'm just going to double the power by taking 1000, turn it into 2000. And then this radius, if I make it a little bigger, what happens is the light just spreads a little softer, which makes it more like a sun looking type thing. So I just modified the light a little bit. This isn't accurate lighting, it's goofy, but it's okay. Down here, we have this world settings, and the world settings are the colors of the scene. So behind the house, you see this? This is the world, and right now it is a gray. If I set that to black, it's gone. It's just, there's no light being added from there. If I change this to white, then I can't see anything because it's too bright. So the best thing to do for this is actually to put something there that I will see instead of the world, because the world is either going to be white or it's going to be black. And black is nice because then I get accurate shadows from my light source, but white is problematic because you can't see shadows anywhere. It's just too bright. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this the world to black. Okay, so there's no world lighting happening here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually create a shape that will be the world of lighting for it. And now you can use a HDMI, which is like a whole other thing, or you can just create a shape that is bent, or put a plane behind it. Okay, so I'm going to use a plane because that's probably like the simplest thing. I'm going to switch back to solid mode here by clicking here, and that just is easier to render. Okay, so a shortcut is to just duplicate this plane I already have. So to duplicate, I'm going to do Shift D on my keyboard. That's going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to rotate it on the y-axis. And then I'm going to rotate it on the z-axis. And I'm going to go 0 so that I see it. And then look at my render. So looking at my render, it seems like the plane is going to block the background. If this is my render, the plane will block the background and it'll be okay. Okay, but I do need to move the plane a little this way, so I'm going to go GY, move the plane over here. And so now I got intersecting planes right there, but I won't have the world light showing, and that's important because the world light will be too bright. Right, so I want to put something there, but I don't want it to wash out all my detail and make my model look horrible, even though the model looks horrible already. Okay, so I'm at the point where I need to add some textures or color to this to make it more interesting, and I'm not going to get super fancy. I'm just going to apply materials to each face, and I'm going to assign a color to each of the faces, and it's going to be kind of a stylistic kind of look here. I'm really just going for like the kindergarten version of drawing a house, but done in CG. So I'm not going to put a huge amount of time. I've positioned my camera, I've done my modeling. Now I'm just going to slap some colors onto these faces so that you can see some changes between the ground and the house and the background and all that. And I will also introduce you to a couple types of shaders. So the two types of shaders I'm going to use are, I'm going to use an emission shader, which creates a lit surface, which is nice for if you have a scene that's dark or a world that's set to black, then you need emission on things to see them, because they're not going to be lit up. And then there's a principled shader, which is the shader that we use for surfaces on things generally. Okay. So to get into my surfacing mode, I'm going to stay in object mode, I'm going to go in edit mode. I'm going to need to go in edit mode. I'm going to go to edit mode on my house, and I'm going to color my house first. So I'm going to edit mode and change to face select. And so to apply materials per face, you just select the faces you want to color. So I'm just going to select the siding. And then I'm going to go down here to materials. That's the material tab. I'm going to add a new material. And when you do that, it creates a principled BSDF. That's a principled shader. I'm going to keep that the way it is. I'm going to get a nice pink house. Okay. And then I have this new material set up. Now notice I have a gray material already. That's my default material. That's what everything is already. I need to assign this pink material to these 4 faces now, which are my siding, because I'm going to have a pink house. So to do that, I'm going to select Assign. And then when I deselect, notice it's now pink. Okay, but you can't really see it very much because it's not very well lit yet. We can work on lighting later. Okay, so now I'm going to make the roof black. So I'm going to select these parts. I'm going to add a new principled shader by pressing the plus. I'm going to select new, and I'm going to make a black shader by bringing that down. I'm going to click assign, so now I got a black roof. Now I think these little triangle sections would be cute if they were like yellow, so I'm going to select these, and I'm going to go new, material, and I'll make them yellow. And assign, so now those are yellow. Some real complicated colors I'm adding here. Now I'm going to add a green field, which will be this bottom plane. So notice I'm trying to select this plane, but I can't select it. That's because I'm in edit mode. I need to get out of edit mode, so I press tab. Now I go over to my plane here, not the plane.001, but this plane. And now I'm going to go down to my materials. Now you can assign a material to an object, and it will take all of the faces in the object and assign that material to it. So since I just have one face here, I'm just going to click new, and then I'm going to make a green material, bright green, why not? There we go, it's done. It's grass. Okay, this one over here, I'm going to use the emission shader. So to illustrate why we use emission shader, I'm going to first use a principled shader. So right now, I'm selecting this plane, and I'm going to add a new shader, and I'm in the rendered mode. This is Eevee. By the way, if you want to change between ray traced and Eevee, this is where you do it. I'm going to change to ray trace because it's just a little less ugly. There we go. So right now, it's you can see the light as it hits that background, and you see it kind of get brighter in the middle and less bright on the edges. That's not how skies work, right? A sky is bright. A sky isn't being lit by the light in front of it, right? So that's wrong. So I need a material that's a little different than the ones on the house and the ground. I need an emissive material. I need a material that's not going to take shadows. It's going to create light. So I'm going to go here on this material, and I got a new material. I'm going to change this from principled to emission. And now right away it just starts like a light bulb. It's just bright as heck. I'm going to change that to a nice bluey kind of sky color. Like that maybe. And I'm going to take this strength and I'm going to turn it down, because right now that strength is really high. It's like coloring, it's coloring everything blue in my scene. So I turned the brightness down on it, and now since that's brighter, I can actually do some stuff with the color. Okay, so now that the sky is lit, and I have my grass and my house has my colors on it, it's ready to render. And I'm chuckling because this is probably some of the ugliest art I've ever made, but it's ready to render. Actually, I think maybe I should add a little more light, because right now it's a little dim. Let's try 4,000 watts. And then let's take that color of that light and let's just make it a little pinker, a little warmer. It looks a little better. It's just the thought that counts. Okay, so next step is rendering. So I already did a switch from Eevee to Cycles, so I'll just go back to that. Cycles and Eevee are two different rendering engines. Eevee is like the rasterized engine that's really quick. Cycles is a ray traced engine that's slower but more accurate. So what I'm going to do is keep this I'm going to switch this to Eevee and render it and see what we get. Okay, so I'll hit render image. I'll show you how you did that. I just hit render image. It's that easy. Or you can press F12. Notice on the edges, we just got some weird stuff happening. We got like this here and this down here. That is because of Eevee. Eevee, it doesn't actually simulate light in the computer. It relies on a process called rasterization, which is kind of faking it. It's what we use in video games usually. Nowadays we have ray trace graphics in some games. It's like an emerging thing, but in Blender, if you want to make a ray trace scene, and I'm going to save that on my desktop so I can see that. Let's just save it out. So to do that, you just say image, save as, right, or save. Now I'm going to close this render. I'm going to switch my render engine to Cycles, and then I'm going to hit render image. And notice it's got this process now. And what it's doing is it's sampling the different parts of my scene. It's determining what the color value would be, what the saturation would be, and then it's taking this accurate simulation to then make the graphics look better. So notice right down here, you already see they've got like accurate soft shadows that meet at the corner. We don't have that weird stuff happening on the edge there. Those are all artifacts created by Eevee. And what we do by changing to Cycles is we just get a more complex process for rendering, but it gets more accurate. The time aspect is huge. That took me 34 seconds to render, but depending on your computer, that could have been a lot longer. So I'm going to save this image, save as, cycles.png. And if I just go open desktop, Eevee, open image. Okay, and if I go render, view render. Where are you? Okay, that gives me the two images side by side. Okay, just let's look at some of the qualities of these images. Okay, where are you? Okay, so on this one here, you notice the corner, just way more accurate. Shadows look smooth. Here we have banding happening, all these artifacts. Those are all, this is what I'm talking about with the rasterized engine. Now, that doesn't mean the rasterized engine is bad. It's actually really important that we work with rasterized engines because if we're getting into game models, those engines use rasterized graphics, so we should optimize our models for rasterized engines if that's where they're going to end up. But most of the time when you see graphics or movies or art, it's a cycles render just because cycles looks better, or it's a ray traced render because ray trace just is more accurate, it looks better. If you do any reading about this online, the big rendering engines out there are like Arnold and Cycles, and then there's like a few others, but these are ray traced, whereas Eevee is a real-time engine that is rasterized, and that's why it creates these ugly artifacts in here that you can fix with time and practice and figuring out how to work with Eevee, but this is just switching without configuring them at all. Okay, so now I have these two pictures, and I could take this picture and submit it to a class, or I could put it online and check out my sweet graphics that I made. If you really want to get into Blender, I recommend joining a Facebook group for Blender. I'm in Blender Artists myself, and it's great. I learned a lot in there. But that's it. I hope that could get you started in Blender if you've never touched Blender before. I went through where to find Blender. I talked about how to navigate a scene in Blender. I showed you how to model something in Blender, and then we rendered things. So I hope that was great to hear. And if you have any questions about Blender and you know how to get a hold of me, I'm looking forward to hearing about you exploring Blender. But I hope you're all doing well and that this was useful to you. And if you'd like any more content from me on Blender, just let me know. So that's it. Thank you very much, everybody.